How many times have you done a really cool activity in class only to have a few students absent? With the time constraints of today's classrooms, it's nearly impossible to redo an activity for absent students, which results in them missing out. What's a teacher to do? It's simple. Podcast. A podcast is a downloadable audio or visual file that is released by episodes. The term podcast was coined by Apple when they started offering this service through iTunes for their popular media device, the iPod. Even though major companies such as ESPN created podcasts during 1998 to 2001, popularity among the public didn't come until 2004. It seems that podcast use among notable companies increased the popularity. Podcasts can help reluctant learners by increasing motivation. If a student didn't understand a concept the first time, they could go back and view or listen to the podcast again as many times as needed. Because a podcast is delivered in electronic format, the student perceives it as being more fun. Podcasts are also great classroom management tools. Lessons and activities can be recorded so students who are absent can view what they missed. If posted on a regular basis, podcasts can be a running record of activities in the classroom. Teachers and students can use podcasts to review content throughout the year. Podcasts are also a great way to inform parents on what students are learning. Since podcasts are posted to the web, students don't have to be inside the classroom to access it. They can access podcasts from their iPods or MP3 players or from their home computer. The possibilities of using podcasts in the classroom are endless. It's basically up to the teacher on how it best fits the needs of the students. Some teachers use podcasts to teach vocabulary. In a recent study of podcasts and vocabulary development in 5th grade students, 5th grade teacher Tara Kingsley created a podcast to teach her students about atoms. She used the tune from the television show The Addams Family and created a new song to teach her students about neutrons, protons, and electrons. The song was called The Addams Family. Students at Willowdale Elementary School in Omaha, Nebraska have their own podcast called Radio Willow Web. The show is produced by students. The podcast topics range from the properties of matter to art history. 8th grade teacher Eric Langhorst from Liberty, Missouri uses podcasting to review materials for upcoming tests. He calls his podcast StudyCast. Book talks are another example of how to use podcasts in the classroom. Instead of having students do a traditional book report, students can create a book talk in which they discuss a book they've read in podcast form. This puts an exciting new twist to book reports. These are just a few examples of how podcasts can be used in the classroom. However, feel free to generate your own ideas for how it would work best for you and your students. If you think you're ready to try podcasting, you will need a computer with internet access. In order to do voice recordings, you also need a microphone. If you are creating a video podcast, then a video recorder will be needed. Last but not least, you will need a program to edit and record your podcast. Audacity for Windows or GarageBand for Mac users are commonly used in the creation of podcasts. Both programs allow you to easily record at the push of a button and edit with a few clicks and drags of the mouse. Once your podcast is complete and you are ready to share your creation with the world, you need to publish it. If you already have a school webpage, your podcast can be uploaded directly to the page. Another alternative could be uploading your podcast to iTunes using an RSS feed. Once your podcast is published, your students can begin reaping the benefits. Here's a podcast I made for my 4th grade science class. We've been studying how to identify a chemical change. A chemical change begins with one kind of matter and ends with another. Some signs of a chemical change are a change in color, smell, and bubbling and fizzing. Let's look at an example of a chemical change. Be prepared to be amazed at this way cool experiment. It's a real gas. Let's get started. I'm going to pour about 150 milliliters of vinegar into the bottom of this 2-liter bottle. Next, use a funnel to pour baking soda into a balloon. Fill the balloon about halfway with baking soda. Now stretch the balloon over the top of the bottle. Lift up the balloon so that the baking soda falls into the bottom of the bottle. Wow, do you see that bubbling? I also hear fizzing. Oh my, look at the balloon, it's blowing up. This is one crazy chemical change. Now let's review the parts that make this a chemical change. We started with vinegar and baking soda, and when combined it formed a gas, a new substance, which filled up the balloon. The gas is actually called carbon dioxide. We also heard fizzing and saw bubbling. All of these are signs of a chemical change. See you next time.